Welcome. I'm really glad that I have you all with us today on Election Science Office Hours, which is a webinar and podcast hosted by the Lynn Center for Science, Society, and Policy, also known as the LCSSP, here at Caltech, and moderated by me, Michael Alvarez. Our Election Science Office Hours archive now has over 30 episodes, which are listed on the Democracy and Elections section of the Lynn Center's website at lcssp.caltech.edu, which is our recently launched website. They're also on our YouTube channel, and they're on Spotify and Apple podcast playlists. So in addition to that, make sure to follow LCSSP for all the updates for the election and democracy work we're doing. We're on LinkedIn, we're on X, we're on Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. And also make sure to follow us on YouTube, where you can get the latest updates on all of our work. And as I said before, for those of you who are with us live, if you have a question, please post it in the Q&A area on the Zoom, and we'll try to answer it as time allows. Okay, I'm super thrilled today because I'm joined by my guest and longtime colleague, Steve Trout, Director of Strategic Partnerships at Clear Ballot. Steve, it is wonderful to have you here today and have a chance to catch up.
Always great to be with you, and appreciate all the work that you and others that assist you do to improve elections.
Great, thank you, Steve. And for those of you who don't know Steve, and I can't believe that there are too many people watching this who don't know Steve. Steve's an election attorney with over 30 years of experience in election administration. He's been around this field probably as long, if not longer than I have, which is really pretty remarkable.
Closer to retirement.
Getting close. I'm getting close too. Starting to watch my 401k every day now, unfortunately.
Don't do that. Yeah.
Yeah, not recently, especially. His experience has been in both state and local government, and of course in the private and nonprofit sectors as well. During his time as state elections director in Oregon, which is where I really got to know Steve very well, and as Senior Elections Counsel here in California, Steve worked for 6 different Secretaries of State, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans. And that's a record that I'm not sure that many people can say that they've met. So that's a really amazing thing. Steve's also served in leadership roles on the executive boards of the National Association of State Election Directors, NASED, and on the U.S. Election Assistance Commission Standard Board. So Steve, welcome to Election Science Office Hours, and thank you for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
So having worked in elections as long as you have, you've witnessed firsthand pretty much every single voting system that's ever been used to humankind. And you've seen how they've evolved, and you've really been part of that evolution. So can you tell us a little bit about this experience and what kinds of voting systems and voting methods you've worked with along the way, and also maybe some of the ones you haven't?
Yeah, no, it's things have definitely changed in the last 30 years, and I think the underlying takeaway for me is all of these improvements in election voting systems have been to improve the voter experience for the voters. Mm-hmm. When I started out, and I've actually got some of the old super heavy punch card machines in my garage as antiques. But, we don't have to worry about pregnant and hanging chads like we did just 25 years ago. But those were the primary, ways that people cast the ballot back at the turn of the century. And, and then we moved to more optical scan, which people are, pretty familiar with from our days, taking Scantron tests back in school. And then moved on to continue to take advantage of technology with touchscreen machines and then paper validation efforts with those touchscreen machines, and then I think one of the challenges at all of those stages is how do we serve our voters with accessibility needs? Mm-hmm. And that was one of the things that, that I really spent a lot of time on trying to figure it out by talking to those people. It's like, mm-hmm. How do you bank? How do you order groceries? How do you do your daily activities? And so that's what led us, 15 years ago now in Oregon to look into using tablets for those accessible ballots. And so, again, things have changed a lot over the years. We've got, in my opinion, the most secure, the most accurate voting systems at any point in human history. And it's our job to try and explain to people so that they can have that confidence as well. But I think what I really appreciate is most of this change has been driven by a need and a desire to make the process easier for the voters and easier for them to understand and have confidence in.
Now, so during that answer, you said the same thing twice, which I find really interesting, and I want to just follow up on this, which is that you think that the changes that have happened with technology have made the process easier for voters. But what about for election officials? Has it made their life better or worse or about the same?
So I think in most ways it has made it better.
Hmm.
It's easier to keep tabs on all the processes, to be able to make sure that the voter ends up with the right ballot style so that they're voting on things based on where they live correctly.
Hmm.
And so a lot of improvements especially in the voter management, in the election databases that the states and the counties use, has really improved that. I mean, I remember, when I first started out in California, and one of the small counties kept all of their paper voter registration forms, which is all they had, in a shoebox.
Uh-huh.
And so we've come a long way. I think even they're using the California system now. I just think that it's easier to be more transparent. It's easier to be able to tell the story of security and kind of list maintenance so yeah, I think some things have made it harder. When I started in elections, you really didn't have to be an IT manager.
Hmm.
Now, if you're leading a county or a state elections office, you need to have a lot of IT understanding. But again, I think on the whole, the benefits way outweigh the challenges and the costs.
Hmm. So let's talk about Clear Ballot, because now you're working there as Director of Strategic Partnerships. What do you do as a Director of Strategic Partnerships?
So I work with existing, current election officials,
Hmm.
and kind of my role is where do we need to be in 2030 and beyond?
Hmm.
So election officials, what are your pain points?
Hmm.
What do you need to be done better or differently in the future? What are your dreams? What do you hope you have in 5 or 10 years that would make your lives a lot easier? And
Hmm.
so, spend a lot of time, having those discussions, seeing if there's places where Clear Ballot can fill those needs, either
Hmm.
short term or long term. But then another big piece of my role is working in legislatures to try to change laws.
Hmm.
A lot of them are based on, generations old technology and the language is there. And so, for example, we just went through a process that, frankly took about a year in New
Hmm.
Jersey to change the rules on how post-election audits can take place in New Jersey. We
Hmm.
had a lot of people. It seems like the trend nationally is we want to audit more ballots
Hmm.
post-election than fewer, and so a lot of local and state rules are 1%, 2%, 5%. We've got people in Florida that are doing 100% with our tools. And so we were able to get the legislature to change the law to allow the tools that we're using new technology to bring transparency and more, looking at more ballots to election officials and the voters.
Hmm. That's got to be an exciting job. In fact, shouldn't they just call you like Director of Strategic Vision or something like that, or Chief Visionary Officer? I
You
mean,
know, I don't put much weight in titles. I know people stress about them a lot, and so it's like that's what they gave me, and so that's
okay.
fine. And I think at this point in my career, they know the name, and the title doesn't matter that much. But but yeah, I'm trying to be strategic and partnerships at multiple levels.
And visionary too. Visionary. Let's not
Sure.
forget
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
visionary part. I mean, I do think that that seems to be one of the things that really sounds exciting about what you're doing.
Right. Well,
Uh,
and so many things in elections are reactive.
right.
And so that's something I've tried to do at all levels, private sector, public sector, is to be proactive and have some vision and take some chances on developing something new. You can't always do that just because of the demands of office in the public sector. But there are times that we don't have to be reactive, and especially on the legislative side, that's a hard one to crack. But in a sick way, it's fun for me.
Well, how do you approach? I mean, again, if you're sitting down talking to an election official, how do you approach getting them to break out of the reactive mode and to actually be visionary and say, okay, well, what are your pain points for things that,
Yeah.
four election cycles ahead? How do you get them? I'd love to know, right? How do you get them to
Yeah.
tell you and reveal to you kind of what those visionary ideas are?
I I think the calendar is the biggest issue, is the biggest determining factor. If you're in early voting, if you're in ballot proofing, if you're, drawing lines for the next election, if you're in candidate filing, if you're processing petitions, it's hard to sit down and spend time thinking about the future. You're just trying to keep your head above water.
Mhm.
And so, when I found the best times is usually in the first quarter of an odd numbered year,
Mhm.
where they've had time to recover from the presidential election or the midterms, and it's like what happened. That's also the time that most election legislation is introduced,
Mhm.
is in the first quarter of an odd numbered year. And so that would be the time that they might be able to make some changes. That's when they're going to ask for their budgets. But I think, and it's also most recent to the pain that they've experienced
Right,
from
right.
from that last election. But I think they have a chance to breathe. They're in the first quarter of the odd numbered year, and so that's actually a good time to talk to them about what would make your life easier. What do you dream of? What could you see helping?
I'd like to be a fly on the wall in some of those conversations. So,
Yeah. Well,
um,
and oftentimes it just kind of starts, not very deep at all, and then sometimes it'll just go really deep, really fast, and that's where we get some good ideas.
so with your experience, vast experience, you could work for anybody. What is it that drew you to Clear Ballot? What about their approach to elections and election technology specifically, drew you to work with them?
And this is actually my second time with them. And the first time was back 2014 to 2016.
Mhm.
And they were just getting started. They were an audit company. Their CEO had pulled me aside at a conference to show me their audit tool.
Mhm.
And it was really impressive. It gives you an image of every single oval cast on the ballot and sorts them. I like to describe it as it pulls the needles out of the haystack, so you can look at the ones that there might be a challenge, with the mark, or it might have been a hesitation mark, or they were writing a love note, or whatever. And so when I met with the CEO at that point, it's like, hey, you're only a couple steps away from having a full voting system.
Mhm.
And the next year at that conference, he'd done it. And so we had a voting system. And so 2014, I joined them. I think I was the 13th employee, and we're able to work on a lot of things, and got the voting system off and running, and especially for vote by mail in Washington and Oregon, and really revolutionized the market there. And then I got a call from the Secretary of State electee in Oregon at the end of 2016, asking me to come back. And so it was a hard choice, but I did that, and served there in Oregon for 4 years, and then came back to Clear Ballot a couple of years ago. As we have over 100 employees now, and so it's
Wow.
like from a startup to a real company. But I think, again, being able to see the images of each individual voter mark and to
Mhm.
be able to go through and sort those, to be able to see, okay, these are all of the overvotes. We can go through them really quickly without having to go and pull those ballots. I just feel like it's the most innovative solution that's out there, but also the most transparent that can build public confidence for the voters. We had a couple of times in a couple of counties that I'm aware of where people came in and it was close and they were contemplating doing a recount. And so we showed them these marks that we were less confident in. They looked through it. It's like, yeah, there's nothing there. We don't want the recount. And so, that's a benefit to final results coming out earlier. It's a
Mhm.
benefit to election officials not having to go through and do all the recount when they're super tired. And it was a benefit to the candidate, even the losing candidate, that they saw those results and decided, okay, yeah, I lost this fair and square. And anytime we can have that happen, especially in the last few years, that's an important piece to be able to show.
Right. So a lot of your experience has been with paper-based voting, in particular voting by mail. What
Yep.
are the big misconceptions that you think people have about, especially voting by mail?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is that people don't understand all of the processes,
Hmm.
all of the double checks and the triple checks. I know when I was in Oregon, I got a lot of people calling and asking questions and making accusations and things. And if I could get them to go to the county and watch the process,
Hmm.
without exception, their jaw would drop
Hmm.
and they would leave as my biggest advocate. Doesn't matter if you're red, blue, green, whatever your biases coming in were. It's
Hmm.
like I had no idea that you checked every signature, that you sorted these ballots, and that you did them in batches, and that you had accounting for each batch, and all of the processes that the election heroes, the election workers do, and they just didn't have any idea of that, and so it's changed a little bit the last 5 to 10 years, where there's some people that aren't looking for the truth. But
Hmm.
if people are looking for the truth and they go in and see those processes, they're going to leave saying, wow, I have full confidence, and they're going to go tell other friends. And so I think that's the challenge is
Hmm.
people don't want to, care is the wrong word, but don't want to learn all the election processes. They just want to know that they can drop their ballot off and it counts, unless it's close. And then when things get close, then people care a lot more. And so, again, I think as election officials, one of the things that's really changed in the last 15, 20 years is we've got to be better educators,
Hmm.
and explaining the processes and answering questions and not being afraid of people challenging us. And yeah, it's gotten a little bit nastier the last few years, but still, I believe those are the fringe loud people, and the people 90% in the middle, that they're just looking to understand, and if we invest that time in them, it will be a good investment.
Hmm. No, I absolutely agree with you. Every time I've had the opportunity, right, to go and just see the process, whether it be in a very small county, whether it be in a huge county like LA County, you just walk out of there just amazed, right,
Yep. Yeah.
at how sophisticated and thorough these processes are, and really how secure the system is from end to end. But how do you think we can close the gap though for those folks who, they're not going to take the time or even maybe have the interest to go and see it in person. But how do we go about really explaining that to them and as you say, educating them about the integrity that the process has?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, and I think especially for election officials, it's hard because they don't have budgets to do
Mhm.
it.
Right.
And so what I tried to do was anticipate the questions.
Hmm.
And so California has, Oregon, the left coast has voters pamphlets, and so I would always put in a page or two of FAQs or things that they might hear to try to dispel it before they hear about it on social media. I've done videos and all of that, and it's just hard to get people to watch. Every now and then something happens, and then they share it, and it gets some good coverage. But I think I think election officials have been really trying, especially the last 10 plus years, to try to figure out better ways to communicate. When I was the Oregon election director all the way through 2020, we didn't have anybody for social media. And so there's stuff all over the place there. And it's like, do you want me to have a social media person, or do you want me to send the ballots? It's always going to be send the ballots. And so that's one of the challenges that's out there, is as things have changed and as needs have changed, budgeting and priorities are usually slow to follow. But I think that can't stop us. We have to tell the story, kind of like campaigns. We need to define ourselves before somebody else defines who we are and what we're doing. And I think we're doing a better job of that. If election officials had bigger resources, I know they could do a better job at that. But I don't have a vote on that.
Right. So from where you are in the industry right now, especially at Clear Ballot, how do you see that election technology can help election officials better tell these stories? Like, how can it help them find anomalies? How can it help them process ballots faster and more quickly and more accurately? And do audits, and do accurate audits, and do explainable kinds of audits. So how does the technology help here?
Yeah, well, and I mean, the technology's there, and the challenge is being able to keep up with technological changes. And I know we're going to talk in a few minutes about a study that you and others did for me in Oregon, that identified that we could check a lot of these anomalies and voter registration and different transactions and all of that. But when you're dealing with outdated mainframes and outdated equipment, it's really hard to use the new technological tools that are there and that could really help us with those outdated systems. And so that's the hard part to navigate here. Is we know that there's tools out there that can help. But in a lot of places, the baseline technology that's being used in governments is outdated and wouldn't really work. And then the other challenge is the certification process of different things, voting equipment, and it takes time. And so, like, the latest, we talk about the new voting system guideline standards. They were adopted in 2021. Technology's changed a lot in 5 years. And those were drafted earlier than that. And so, I think that's part of the challenge too, is these systems that are having to go through and be tested and approved, can't always take advantage of the new technology, and frankly, in some cases, the new security. And so that's the hard part, and how we keep these systems as current as possible.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this project that we did, and this was a research project that involved Paul Garanke and Paul Mason at EVIC and Reed College, and Sylvia Kim, who was then a PhD student here at Caltech, and she's now at Seoul National University. And we produced this report, the Oregon Election Performance Auditing Pilot Project Analysis and Recommendations, and I think it's still online somewhere. Came out in 2020, and this was a great opportunity. I love projects like these because we got to work directly with you, right? Which was tons of fun, and I have to say was really amazing to involve like a PhD student like Sylvia in too, right? Because having the ability to take her incredible skills and to apply them to some important problems like we were doing in Oregon, and again, work directly with someone like you was just an amazing experience for her. We wrote to you in this report, I'm going to quote, and I'm going to read it here. While we did not find any immediate vulnerabilities in the voter registration system, We found high quality and accurate data in the system. The most important and pressing conclusion of our report is that the Oregon centralized voter system, like many voter registration systems nationwide, is difficult to audit as it is based on outdated technology that needs to be modernized. And I just my note here is like to ask you what's your biggest takeaway. I suspect that's probably it, but what really was your biggest takeaway from that project?
My biggest takeaway is I needed somebody else to say it because I've been saying it for years. And so that's the challenge, but I also think that's a great use of a partnership between academics and election officials to be able to come in with some expertise. I'm hoping to be an election expert someday. I just can't figure out how to do it. But to be able to communicate that. And I think the sad part is I think they're still running the same system today.
Right.
They had an RFP out to get a new system, and then had to pull the plug here a year or so ago. But I think that was my biggest takeaway is I knew it, but it was good to have somebody else say that to at least move it up the food chain a little bit to be able to have those discussions rather than the election director just complaining because he doesn't have the latest and greatest stuff.
Mhm.
But also I think that it showed that we have to be judicious in what tools we talk about and what we look towards based on what's actually practicable based on the technology that is in place there. And yeah, we can look at where we want to go with technology and what our new system might look like, but this is what we have to dance with today.
Mhm. So one of the things I really loved about that project was it involved a direct collaboration between academics and election officials. And we don't see as many of these collaborations between academics and industry as we have seen in I think recent years between academics and election officials. Um, so in a recent episode, just in January, I had Michael Spector from Georgia Tech and his graduate student researcher Delaney Goldman on, and we talked a bit about this because they're actually interested in this problem. And as you know, the computer science group community in the academic world has had a particularly adversarial relationship with the election technology industry. And I know that you were really passionate about building collaborations and networks, but do you think that there's been an improvement in communication and collaboration? And if so, what's facilitated that in recent years?
So I would say for election officials and academics, I think there's been a huge improvement.
Mhm.
And I think, similar to our project, part of
Right.
what made that great was I came and said, this is what I would like. This is what I'm thinking. This is my vision. This is what I would like to do. Tell me what we can and can't do. And
Mhm.
and and you and the Pauls and did that. And so we were working together on a joint problem. I think 15 years ago, there weren't those conversations. People would do an elections research project and wouldn't talk to an election official, or got a couple of quotes and then would release it 2 weeks before the election, and that just destroyed any trust with the election officials. It's like I don't care what that report says, good or bad. Putting something out 2 weeks before an election is damaging, and so I think that has really improved. And I think academics and researchers now understand the pain that we were feeling because of the time of those things being released. And then also, though, I think a few of us um, really had some successes,
Mhm.
and then we would start sharing those at conferences.
Mhm.
And so people saw it as, okay, there might be something in this for me. Because I think before their mindset was, well, this is going to be a gotcha. They're not looking into anything that I care about. They're just writing they're writing what they think they want to write about. And so I think today there's a lot of examples of
Mhm.
election officials and academics working together on a problem, and working together to try to improve it. And election officials know that they're trying to do that, and so they're willing to give access to those academics. And as you know,
Mhm.
the biggest challenge in this is giving access to some of this sometimes private data and information that we need to make sure that we're protecting the privacy of the voters, but then figuring out a way to give you enough data that you can actually do your research on. And one of the other things I learned, working with you and the Paul and others, through the years was there's great value in your scientific methods at we need to test this and build a baseline, but then continue to test it so that we can see how
Mhm.
things are changing, how our efforts, how our improvements, whether they are improving things or not. And so a lot of times that's hard with the public sector to be able to get funding to do something more than once. And
Mhm.
so I think we were able to do a couple of things in Oregon, just again, because it's, that was a passion that I continued to preach. But I really think a lot of the improvement is because academics and election officials have worked together and we've been able to tell those success stories. And there's been, compared to 20 years ago, there's probably 5 times more people researching elections now, than there were back then. And so I think that's helped to kind of weed out, some of the better ones that we want to work with, and some of the ones that weren't that good to work with have moved on to other areas.
Well, let's talk about academics or researchers in industry now too. So
Yeah.
what, because I think those kind of partnerships are still very rare. I mean, I agree with you that there has been a lot of growth and a lot of focus on building collaborations between academics and election officials, but not so much in industry.
No.
How do we build those partnerships and collaborations?
So I mean, I'm hoping it's going to be the same pattern.
Hmm.
Because again, where it is today, I don't see that it's much different than where it was, 15 years ago with academics. But I think, part of the challenge with the industry and especially with computer sciences is that election officials aren't as confident in their own understanding of the technical aspects, frankly. And so it's harder to to push back or to have a good collaboration or feel like it's not a gotcha. And I don't think it's a gotcha out there, but I think it's a challenge of um, you're guilty until proven innocent on some of these vulnerabilities that are identified, whether there's a procedural mitigation in place or not. And so I think that's one of the hurdles that we have to get over, because a lot of times, yeah, every system's got vulnerabilities. You give people enough access and time and resources, they can break into Fort Knox. Is the story I would always tell. And so, yes, election officials don't have unlimited budgets. And so they're going to have to assume some risk in some of their systems just for to make sure that the vote can go to all people.
Right.
But there are procedures that you can implement that then mitigate any of those or mitigate those risks. And so the election officials got to kind of pick and choose. Okay, which risk am I willing to accept within the technology solution, and where are the procedural steps that can mitigate that risk. And so far I don't think we've done a very good job at communicating that give and take. It's either this is a vulnerability or it's not. And again, I believe we're always going to find some vulnerability out there, but we also have procedures and processes that can mitigate those vulnerabilities. And so being able to have better conversations to weigh that, rather than, okay, we did this and we found this.
Hmm.
It's like, okay, great. How does that improve elections? Is it really revealing a risk or not? And my mindset was always, when I was the election director in Oregon, it's like I want to know ahead of time if there's a problem so that I can address it. if it's after the election started, there's not a lot I can do except look good on TV, and that's not going to be good. And so that's I think that's part of the challenge is number one, what's different from academics and election officials to election officials and technology folks or academics and technology folks is that understanding and confidence in understanding of some of the more technical stuff. I mean, it's kind of intimidating to go talk tech with somebody that's a Caltech professor, right? Just like it would be intimidating to talk to me about election administration, in a vote by mail state. But how do we find that common ground so that we recognize that we're all trying to help and work together to be able to do that? And so I think, I think the other challenge to industry and academics is the certification realm. And it's like if there's a lot of provisions now that if there's any anomaly found, you have to post it on the EAC website. And so, that, I understand what they're trying to do, but I don't know that that's helping, make election systems any better. But I think, I really think we should start having those conversations. And part of the challenge is, the EAC, it's there, and then it was gone for a few years, and then it comes back, and then they've got new direction, so they're in a tough spot as well to be able to lead or to provide much vision. But I really think there's conversations there that we could help to at least start to build that trust and recognize the value that we can each provide to each other, as we go forward. Because as I can't remember if I've already said it or not, but one of the things that I think really has improved for academics and election officials is the ones I've talked to, it's a lot easier to get funding for a project when you say, oh, this election, this state person, this county person really wants to research this, so it shows that it's a real problem and has helped to be able to get people to fund research. Because I know, just like election officials don't have unlimited budgets, neither do researchers. And so maybe there are ways there that we can work together to improve the trust and the win-win relationship from industry and academia.
So, do you have any concrete tips or real concrete pieces of advice for exactly how to do that? I mean, like, let's say I have a colleague and they're really excited about working on a project with Clear Ballot. What's your advice for them to proceed in terms of, trying to strike up a conversation and to help you understand what they're interested in and to build that relationship and that trust?
Right. Well, I mean, Clear Ballot one's easy. Let's talk.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you, that's great that you're coming with me an idea. I'm probably going to have an idea as well that I'd like you to do as well. I want there to be value in this, for us as well. And again, I think it's a lot easier now than it was 15 years ago because we can have these conversations and find common ground that will be of benefit to the research and
Yeah.
benefit to Clear Ballot to be able to go forward. And then I think concrete example, I think just recognizing some of the constraints on on voting system vendors and the microscope that we're under, and recognizing that there's people out there that are looking to pounce on any little thing, real or perceived. And to be able to just openly have those conversations and recognize that if I'm coming in to do research, I need to recognize that Clear Ballot or whoever the vendor is, what their constraints are, just like you would have to do for election officials, and understanding that the timing of the report and what you say, there's better ways to do it without jeopardizing your research or you being able to express your conclusions. It's just about when. So so I think just recognizing where each side's coming from, I think can help us to move forward and build build that trust, because it's
Right.
like I think people have to recognize that it's like you're not coming in here to find a hole in it so that you can go out and publish a paper so that you can get more funding. That's not helping elections. Is your purpose to help yourself in publishing, or is it to help improve elections? And if you're trying to help improve elections, I think we can do that, and we just need to collaborate more.
One of the things I've been thinking about lately is just how do we facilitate these conversations? I mean, how do we how can we set up a process or something where, on the academic side, we can learn more about what folks like you in industry, what your concerns are, what you think the research community should focus on. What are your pain points on these conversations that you're
Yeah.
having with election officials? We need to figure out a way that we have these conversations with industry.
Right.
How do you think we can do that?
So, I mean, I think we need to get, a few of us together to start.
Hmm.
And then a project or two to show that
Right.
it can be done and to have success. I know I was working on a project with DARPA on military online voting.
Right.
And so we couldn't even get out the door talking to people because it's like, oh, you're just pushing internet voting. And it's
Hmm.
like, that's not what we were doing. We were trying to understand ways to get ballots across the ocean because
Hmm.
during a pandemic we couldn't do it. And so that's often, I think, what kind of puts the brakes on some of this collaboration is people, jump to a conclusion.
Hmm.
And so if we can get the right people, I think, to start having the conversations, that it's not really looking at an agenda, but is how can we make things better without jumping to conclusions. I think that's what it's going to have to take to get started.
Yeah, well, I think we should talk more about that because
Yeah.
I really think, in the past, the Caltech MIT Voting Technology Project, had a couple of events like that, and we really haven't had anything like that for a while, and maybe now's the time to start nucleating that and trying to see where that goes. Because
And I think I was just going to say, I think this is a good time because, technology, we've got a new generation of voting systems coming through. We've got, more technology with poll books and with election night reporting and post-election audits and voter registration system audits. That there's more and more technology. And I think my hope is that with the new common data formats coming out, that there will be better opportunities so that somebody's really good at this module can just build that module, but then we will talk to the others. And I think that's one of the challenges of where we are today. And so in order to in order to get more players involved and research that, I think that's a conversation that should be had, and that we can acknowledge that there's things that we can help each other with.
Mhm. So from where you're at now, again, you've got this kind of nice visionary job. Like a decade from now, or even maybe 2 decades from now, where what's your vision for where election technology is going to be heading in the next decade or two?
So, I mean, whatever the public will accept. I mean, I think that's the answer now, because I think we've got technology today that can make things better, but the public, for whatever reason, doesn't have full confidence in it.
Mhm.
And so that's why that was kind of my approach with bringing the tablets in for the accessible
Right.
voters. It's like that's something that they used in the rest of their life, and so that was not too big of a leap for them, and they understood it. And I think that's one thing I try to teach and inspire the next generation of election officials that are coming up is, number one, you need to understand the technology you're using.
Mhm.
And two, you need to be able to explain that technology in a way that your stakeholders can understand, whether that's a voter, whether that's a candidate, whether that's the media, whether that's a political party, whether that's an academic. And so I think those are important pieces. But to your question, I think that I think that validating and verifying voters is going to be the biggest
Mhm.
um, is the biggest issue. I don't really think it's going to be on the voting system side. Um, you look at vote by mail.
Mhm.
People mostly use signatures to validate that voter.
Mhm.
Um, you know, most of my kids' generation don't have a signature.
Mhm.
And so I don't think we're going to be able to rely on that very much longer. And so what's next? I
Mhm.
mean, yeah, there's all this biometric stuff that we could do, but who's going to submit to go in and give their thumbprint or retinal scan to the government to build a database? I don't think that's going to happen. So, one of the things I've been thinking about is, well, what about TSA?
Mhm.
We go to TSA and I can walk up and it takes my picture and it verifies it and I step on through. I think they got that picture from my driver's license. And so that's probably something people are willing to accept. And so I think that's where we're going to see the biggest changes, especially in the next 10 years, is how do we validate voters? And again, the technology, there's lots of technology solutions that could work, but what will the public accept?
Mhm.
And so, it's more of a social science question than it is a technology question.
Well, that's a great answer. I love
Thank
that,
you.
and it's well, it just because well, I think it really answers a lot of just sort of the fundamental problems that we've seen over the last 3 decades, and
Yeah,
yeah, because all these technology, a lot of these technologies have been around for a long time,
yeah,
and yet they're not being used in elections. And well, why is it? Because they're not transparent, they're not explainable, right?
right.
And I think also that, that's part of the reason why you and I yet we've been talking for 47 minutes and we haven't mentioned AI, right? Because
Yeah,
that's the basic problem that it has in particular in this particular area, right? In terms
right.
of adoption. So, um, but we have been going for 47 minutes, and I got to be real cognizant of your time because I know we could probably talk for hours. But um, before I let you go, one of the things I really love to talk to folks on the show about is their origin story in elections. So, you know, I've known you for a long time, and you are one of the most passionate people about elections that I've ever met. So, where did that passion come from? I mean, how did you catch the bug here of elections?
How far back do I want to go?
You can go as far back as you want to go. I mean, it was it, when
So,
you're like
so
in
my
first grade
my
when
my seventh great grandfather, who's
uh-huh.
sitting in the chair there, was Benjamin Harrison.
Okay, there you go. That's
Um,
far
and
further back than I thought you'd go.
but for me, I was working in the legislature in California
Uh-huh.
um, back when the balance of power was even,
Hmm.
and 1996 election or 1998, one of those two elections. I was staffing the elections committee and a couple other committees in the Senate, and there were two very close contests after election night. One in Monterey County and one in Alameda County, that were going to dictate, whether the Republicans or the Democrats had control of the state Senate. And so the election lawyers got on the phone and gave us a 30-minute, all the staffers gave us a 30-minute election law primer and sent us out into the field. And everybody wanted to go to Monterey County until they learned it was Salinas. And I got assigned to Alameda County in the basement of the Alameda County Courthouse. And so a lot of what we were doing was observing the signature verification of the mail ballots that were coming in after that were being processed after election day. They come in on time, obviously. And so the first 3 or 4 hours, we're just watching these, and I'm learning how subjective that process was at that time. And so at lunch break, I went next door to the law library and looked up the elections code, which I know you spent some time with this week as well, and learned some things. I learned that it's not as clear or as well written as it probably should be, and so I've been doing that ever since. But it helped to build better laws in California about that signature verification process, which again, back in the 90s was still pretty new. And we were just moving on from punch cards. But that was just something that hit me, and it's like we need to make sure that this process is fair. And like I tell my kids all the time, it's like, in my job, it doesn't matter who wins or loses. We want to make sure that the process is right, and the public chooses to be wrong a lot. But I don't care about that. We need to make sure that the process is right and reflects the will of the voters. And so that's how I got started.
Well, I have to say I'm glad you didn't end up in Salinas because who knows what would have happened then. There's kind of an inside joke there for only I think Californians will understand, right? Or someone who's been to Salinas. In any case, is there anything we haven't talked about today that you wanted to talk about or bring up?
Well, I think I said this, early on, but and probably all of the people that are watching this know, but I just try to say it every time I can. You know, I believe we have the best, most accurate, most secure voting systems at any time in human history.
Mhm.
And even though we know that, the public confidence in elections is going down. And so I think all of us that are tied to elections need to be better um, storytellers to be able to help the public know. I know when I talk to people that know me, um, you know, they feel a lot better about things, even though they have some questions before they come in. And so let's use our knowledge and our power for good to help build confidence amongst voters. And again, most people believe us and think we're doing a good job. And a lot of others just need to learn a little bit more about what we do. Some people aren't ever going to be happy, but there's nothing I can do about that. So it's hard to prove a negative, but if we can go out and better define what we're doing and the passion that we have to defend democracy, which there's very few election officials in my lifetime and experience that I don't that aren't passionate about defending the vote.
Mhm. Thank you. I think that's just a wonderful way to frame what I guess, basically the challenge that we face in 2026. And
Yep.
I think we all are going to need to step up to that challenge. I think if we can do that and help explain, like you just did, why our elections have a great deal of integrity, I think we'll have a successful election this cycle. So thank you, Steve.
Agreed.
And I really appreciate you being on the show. And it is so wonderful to catch up again. So thanks again.
Thanks. Let's do it again.
We'll have to. I'll take you up on that. So take care. Thank you.